Welcome to this lecture, Introduction to Intellectual Property. So today we want to look at various components that make us familiar, or that will make us familiar with the various tenets of intellectual property. But before we talk about the main tenets of intellectual property, which are patents, utility models, industrial designs, copyrights, trademarks, geographical indications, and trade secrets, we just want to have a little of appreciation of why intellectual property. So, in terms of definition, intellectual property, it is defined as the creations of the human mind. And these creations will serve two purposes. It's either for business creation or for improvement of human life. So, any intellectual property that is created should have an economic value, or should enable the improvement of human life, or improve the standards of human life. And it should also have industrial applicability. So for it to be called intellectual property, it has to be useful, it has to be usable, it has to have a purpose in life. And the main tenets or the main branches of intellectual property are industrial property and copyrights plus related rights. So the main branches of intellectual property that we have, we realize under industrial property we will be talking about patents, utility models, trade secrets, etc. Under copyrights, that's where we will be talking about things to do with literary and artistic works, so literary and artistic works the same as written works. We'll be talking about music or composition. We'll be talking about broadcasting related rights, films. So those are the two main branches of intellectual property. So earlier on I said we just need to have an appreciation of why do we need to create or protect intellectual property. And I said earlier that intellectual property is mainly created for improvement of human life and for business purpose. So it means it has to have economic value. Now when you look at the economy that we used to have back in the days, it was economies that were based on raw materials, economies that were based on land, economies that were dominated by the trading of real goods, the trading of real assets, economies that were built around cheap labor. You look at it, for example, the issues to do with slave trade. Now, as the role of intellectual property in economies is now dominant, things have changed. The basis of many economies is now shifted. And even if we are to look at it, the economies that are struggling these days are the ones that have stuck in the old way of doing things, where they are predominantly dominated by the use of land, producing and selling raw materials without adding any value or adding any intellect to it. The new economy these days, it is based on knowledge, it is based on data, it is based on the creations of the mind. So you will realize someone in an economy where someone might have a very big piece of land, let's say 500 hectares. Yes, it's an asset, but its value might not even match someone who has an intangible asset like Facebook as a brand. It will be worth in billions. It is worth billions of dollars. When you look at the 500 acres of land, it will never match the value of a of Facebook. So you can see how economies have shifted, how goods have moved from being the dominant factor in trade. Now goods, they are now being made, or they are now being made valuable by the intellectual property that is surrounding them, by the intellectual property that is used to package them, the intellectual property that is used to make them. So these creations of the mind, these ideas, have increased even the value of trade that we now see these days, the value of exports. All this is a result of the concept of intellectual property. A branded good is worth more than an unbranded good. A goods that is an indication of source where it was made is more valuable than a good or than a product that doesn't have an indication of source. And also what intellectual property has enabled us to do, it has enabled us to collaborate and allow us to give our products to other people to sell on our behalf or to make on our behalf, because we are now selling knowledge. We are not giving them knowledge, we are not giving them intellect. So they can use that same intellect to make the product that we are making, and they will make them and sell them on our behalf. And this has ensured that goods that we traditionally made and sold in a particular market, they can now be made and sold in different geographical areas. They can now be made and be distributed globally. And all this has been made easy by technology. The internet has enabled us to easily do business, to easily transact, to easily share information. So the new economy is more about knowledge more than anything else. So let's go a little bit deeper into the various branches of IP so that we see why intellectual property is the knowledge of the day, or is the business of the day. So like I said earlier on, that we have two main branches of IP, which are industrial property and copyrights and related rights. So the following forms of IP are all under the branch of industrial property. We have patents, trademarks, integrated circuits and layout designs, industrial designs, geographical indications, trade secrets, plant varieties, among others. All these, they fall under industrial property. So let's try to look at each one of the items that we've mentioned independently so that we get an appreciation of each item, what it does, what it protects, how it is protected, how it is defined. So the first thing that we'll look at is the concept of patents. What is a patent? This is an exclusive right that is granted for a creation of the mind that has been disclosed or that has been shared with the public. So what you are getting is you have your creation, you have your product that you have made, and that no one else has been able to make. Now, what the patent protection does is, in exchange of that knowledge, you are given a 20-year exclusive license to economically exploit and use that creation of yours. So you are granted monopoly for 20 days in exchange for full disclosure of information. However, this disclosure or this protection is not global. Patent rights are territorial. So for you to have your rights or to have your product protected in each and every country, you have to file for patent protection in each country. So which means if you protect or you are granted an exclusive license, your 20 years of exclusivity in a particular territory, someone in another territory can get hold of your knowledge, use it to make the same product, and even sell it. As long as you have not protected your rights in that territory, that person can be able to exploit your rights, and you stand to lose that market if you don't take corrective action. So it is important that if your technology you think it is very novel and very new and is useful to the global market, or you can be able to determine the kind of markets where your technology can be used, it is important that you quickly go and protect that technology in those markets. And there are various ways in which you can protect your invention. So it's either you can use the national route, which means with the national route, your rights are only granted to a single jurisdiction, that is the country in which you have filed for those rights. The regional route, this is now where you can use the regional office. For example, here in Africa, we have two regional offices that are responsible for the protection of intellectual property, the ARIPO and the OAPI offices. So the ARIPO is mainly made up of countries that are former British colonies, and the OAPI office is made up of countries that are mainly former French colonies. So if you file through a regional route, which means if the ARIPO has 26 members or OAPI has 26 members, you select states or what we call designated states that are part of that regional office. So with that single application, you automatically file in those countries that we have selected as designated states. So which means if I want to protect in 5 Southern African countries or in 5 countries that are members of ARIPO, when I fill in my forms that I use to file for patent protection, I'll just select the designated states or the countries where I want my rights to be protected. Then I submit the form. Then the regional office is responsible for transmitting the application to the relevant offices. And actually, it is also responsible for doing all the necessary administrative works that needs to be done. That is from the formalities examination to the substantive examination until the point where the patent is granted and even published. So I think we'll look at this in detail, how a patent is granted and what are the things that are needed to be done for you to be granted a patent protection. We also have an international route that you can use. This is done through the World Intellectual Property Office. So you can just file a single application and all members that are part of WIPO. So let's say, for example, you want to file for protection in the 5 African countries that we were talking about in the previous example. So let's say you want to file for protection in 5 African countries, or maybe let's say 6 African countries, 3 in ARIPO, 3 in OAPI. Then maybe 2 European countries, 2 Asian countries. So instead of going through the regional or routes or the national offices, where if we are going to go regional, you are going to file at ARIPO for the 3, and file at OAPI for the 3, and maybe file at the EPO for the 2. You can do this using the international route, which is managed by WIPO. And the international route for patent protection is called the PCT, named after the treaty that governs patent protection globally. So you just go to the WIPO office or the WIPO website, fill in the relevant application form. Most of these things cannot be done online. Then you submit your application and select the designated state. So you'll be selecting three in Southern Africa, 6 countries in Africa. That is 3 members of ARIPO, 3 members of OAP, 2 members of the European offices, and 2 from the Asian. So all this you'll be doing it in a single application, which will then be managed by WIPO. So all members of WIPO that we have selected will receive this application. Let me go back a little bit and talk about this. So if you want to file for patent protection, there's a criteria that is used. First, we have to look at your invention or your creation. Is it really new? Is it novel? Has anyone else before created this thing? So your creation doesn't have to exist in prior art. It doesn't have to have a record of it having been made somewhere. So for patent protection, novelty is absolute. Though sometimes it differs country to country, but the standard is novelty should be what? Should be absolute. Then we look at the inventive step. If what you have created is new, can someone who is skilled in the art or skilled in the field, let's say an electric engineer, can someone who is also an electric engineer not be able to come up with the same invention? So there has to be an inventive step that someone skilled in the art cannot be able to do by default. Then we also look at the issue of, is your invention useful? Can we make it or reproduce it at an industrial scale? After we've made it at an industrial scale, is it usable in solving a particular problem? So these are the criteria, or these are the key issues that are considered before you think of filing for a patent protection. Make the necessary consultations, engage the necessary personnel, the necessary skilled people to check if this is novel, if this is inventive, if this is industrially applicable. So we have talked about one IP right under the industrial property, which is patents. Let's take a short break, then we'll continue after this.